We stopped our car in the forest for less than 1 minute. That decision destroyed 3 lives, and even today, I don't know why that thing chose us. It was a quiet summer night when I was driving my car through the forest roads of Blackwood County, Oregon. The road was narrow, surrounded by tall trees that blocked most of the sky. There were no streetlights, no houses, and no signs of life anywhere around us. Inside the car were my 2 closest friends, Daniel sitting in the passenger seat and Mark sitting quietly in the back. The full moon hung above the forest, its pale light slipping through the branches and barely lighting the road ahead. Even with the windows closed, the forest felt cold and watchful, as if something unseen was already aware of our presence. After a few minutes of silence, Mark leaned forward and spoke in a tense voice, asking me to pull over because he urgently needed to use the bathroom. I laughed softly and told him the timing was bad because I needed a break too. I slowed the car and parked it on the side of the road. Daniel and I stepped out and walked a short distance into the bushes, while Mark crossed to the other side of the road and disappeared into the darkness. At that moment, everything still felt normal. We had no idea this simple stop would turn into a nightmare. The forest was unnaturally quiet. No insects, no wind, no distant animal sounds. Just silence. The kind of silence that presses against your ears and makes your thoughts louder. When Daniel and I finished and walked back toward the car, Mark was nowhere to be seen. Daniel called out his name, but there was no response. I tried to stay calm and told myself that Mark was probably trying to scare us. Still, a strange uneasiness settled in my chest. I raised my voice and shouted his name again. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, without any warning, a scream tore through the forest. Mark's voice echoed in pure terror as he cried for help and begged someone to let him go. My heart dropped instantly. That scream wasn't fake. It wasn't a joke. It was the sound of real fear, the kind you never forget. Daniel grabbed my arm and whispered that something was seriously wrong. We ran toward the direction of Mark's voice. Only a few steps into the forest, my flashlight landed on dark stains scattered across the ground. Blood. Fresh blood smeared across dry leaves. My breathing became shallow and my hands started shaking. Then I noticed deep drag marks in the soil, as if someone had been pulled away violently. That was the moment I realized we were already too late. We followed the marks deeper into the forest, and that's when we saw her. A tall woman wearing a long block dress stood ahead of us, her hair covering her face. She was dragging Mark by his leg as if he weighed nothing at all. Mark was screaming, crying, begging for his life. We shouted and ran toward her, but her movement was unnatural, wrong in a way I can't explain. Within seconds, she vanished into the trees, as if the forest itself had swallowed her. Mark's screams faded into silence. The drag marks didn't stop. They led us even deeper into the forest until we reached an abandoned 2-story wooden house hidden among the trees. The building looked dead. Broken windows, rotting wood, and thick vines crawling over its walls. The air around it felt heavy and suffocating, like the house was breathing. Suddenly, from inside the house, Mark screamed one last time. Then everything went quiet. That silence was worse than the screaming. Daniel whispered that we should not go inside, that whatever we had seen was not human. My legs felt weak and my heart was racing, but I forced myself forward. I told him that if we didn't go in, Mark was already dead. Inside, the house smelled of rot and dust. Cobwebs covered the ceiling, broken furniture lay scattered across the floor, and old photo frames hung crooked on the walls.
The photos showed a smiling man and woman, frozen in happiness that clearly didn't last. Suddenly, a scream echoed from upstairs. I noticed blood dripping slowly down the staircase. My chest tightened as I ran up the stairs, each step heavier than the last. In the hallway, I saw something that made my body go numb. Mark's body was hanging from the ceiling, his legs tied with a rope and his arms hanging lifelessly toward the floor. His head was missing. Daniel screamed behind me, and for a second my mind refused to accept what my eyes were seeing.
Then something impossible happened. We heard Mark's voice again, softly calling for help. The voice came from a room at the end of the hallway. At that moment, I still believed there was a chance he was alive. Slowly, with shaking hands, we walked inside. The room was dark, and my flashlight trembled as I pointed it toward the corner. A woman was sitting on the floor with her back facing us, crying softly in Mark's voice. I asked where Mark was, and she slowly turned around. My legs gave up beneath me. She had no head. In her hands, she was holding Mark's severed head. The head smiled and spoke, telling us he was right there. Before we could react, the woman lifted the head to her neck, and with a violent, sickening movement, it attached itself to her body. She stood up, stared directly at us, and whispered that we must bring her head, or she would take ours. We ran out of the house without looking back. I didn't stop running until I realized something horrifying. Daniel wasn't with me. When I turned around, I saw him slowly walking back toward the house, his eyes empty and lifeless. She was controlling him. I grabbed his arm, but he pushed me hard and I crashed into a tree. My vision blurred, and when I opened my eyes again, Daniel was gone. Inside the house, I found him standing still, holding a knife against his own neck and whispering that he needed to bring her head. I tried to reach him, tried to scream his name, but before I could stop him, he did it himself. I collapsed to the floor, unable to move, unable to breathe. Behind me, a familiar voice whispered that I was next. The woman blocked the exit and finally told me her story. She had been murdered in that house years ago. Her head was taken and her body was buried without it, leaving her soul incomplete and trapped. I had no choice. I searched a nearby lake for hours until I finally found her skull buried deep in the mud. That night, I burned her remains together. Her spirit screamed, a sound filled with pain and rage, and then disappeared into the darkness forever. I survived that night, but I never returned to Blackwood County again. Some roads are not meant to be stopped on, and some screams never leave the forest.